Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. This is the Labatt Postgame Show, the last one of the regular season, but not the last one of this run. We were expecting. I've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of days, 2-3 days. Logistics. We have a new sponsor here on the Postgame Show. All these things for the postseason. We're setting these conversations up, thinking, okay, December, right? That's all happening the 20th. 21st. No. Penn State football is in the Big Ten championship game. They are in the Big Ten championship game against Oregon. In the first time in 8 years that the Nittany Lions have advanced to the championship game. And kind of like the last time around, you had a weird feeling sitting there watching the Ohio State game that, oh, this is actually happening. They did not control their own destiny, losing to the Buckeyes. And now I'm telling you, the Penn State superfan here filing in to the BWI Live postgame show, already know these things. But it's just being there in 2016 at the stadium and being there this afternoon for the tailgate. It was eerily the same. A little warmer that other day. I think a few more people were at that game because it was more up in the air. Michigan was a better team in 2016, so it felt like it was more of a 50-50 situation at that point. For Michigan to come through in this game today, to set up Penn State to win against Maryland 44-7 in a game that felt herky-jerky to begin with, totally it felt like the whole day overall. Just a little bit wild to start, but unlike other situations around the country over the last couple of weeks, Penn State settled in, and they did what they needed to do, which was beat up on the bottom of the Big Ten, 44-7. The conversation all this year has been about style points. It's been about the ability to be a complete football team, be the most impressive football team. And in the end, all Penn State had to do is win as many of the games as it could on its schedule, and it did that. It went 11-1, handled its business, no mistakes, no letdowns, squeaked by Minnesota. And here they are on the verge of the 1 seed in the college football playoff. This week, they're going to be ranked top 4, and they're not going to be 4th. This is wild. This is the college football playoff. This is what you wanted for these games and these situations. Penn State, we were talking, I was a phone conversation yesterday, debating the value of the 6th and the 7th seed. And the number 1 seed is still on the table because Penn State took care of their business against Maryland, started out rough, and then the second quarter hit and the game was over. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. I want to get your thoughts here on the post-game show. As always, when it's a home game and the guys are out at the stadium, I am here by myself, but I'm never by myself because you guys are the co-host. JW in the chat, he says, hoping for a Big Ten championship win. Can a loss hurt us in the playoff? I don't believe so. The college football playoff committee can do whatever they want. They have no rules, and they've shown that they will do whatever they want. But if they were to go into that game, be competitive with Oregon, and let's be honest about that, Penn State has been competitive with every single team that they have faced this year, including Ohio State, who was competitive with Oregon. And the transitive property doesn't work in football, but they're not so far off that it would be a massive surprise for them to get blown out. So at worst, the 6th seed, which was at best where they were going to be before today. So no, I don't believe that a loss would kill them in the playoff seeding generally. But I do think that it will give them the opportunity to climb higher. So no, it is a win-win scenario for Penn State. They lose the game, they're right where they are now, before today. They win the game, oh my gosh, they get a bye. How crazy would that be? David says, thank you, Michigan. And I'm sad Tyler didn't get to 1,000 yards. Nick running the ball well again. Yes, we'll get into those things, which is more my speed. And David, thank you for the pivot to the actual game, because those, the big picture stuff, okay, fine. I'm dialed in on the X's and O's in the game. We can talk about that. Maryland had 194 yards. Penn State had over 400. The late touchdown here from James Franklin feels a little salty. on fourth down. But, it is what it is. Leave nothing to chance if you're James Franklin to get as many of those points in those plays as possible. The Beard Father, Michael McCullen, he's back. He says, best Saturday ever. Appreciate everyone being here. We're going to be going on a ride together because this is the first time we've ever done a lot of these things in this iteration. First time the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel has been in this form for a Big Ten championship game. That's coming up this week. A full week of Penn State football coverage. We are pivoting back into full season coverage for this coming week. So that's coming up here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. James Franklin's press conference coming up afterwards. You should subscribe here to the channel so you get all that information. But more than anything, subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com right now because we were thinking off-season mode. I was planning for signing day on Wednesday. Now it's signing day plus planning for the championship game. College football's December period is a mess. This is ridiculous. How they could be doing one thing and the other at the same time is bananas. So James Franklin and his staff are going to have to be splitting those things up because there's still a lot of things left to happen when it comes to National Signing Day and some of those targets we've been talking about at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Lots of news there this week as well. Some really good news on the recruiting front. So great time to subscribe here to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, the site. And of course, here on the YouTube channel, this is a free public place for you to come and hang out. And we'll talk about stuff generally. Let's get into the game because it could not have started worse for us talking about getting out of this game as quickly as possible, getting your starters out as quickly as possible, being healthy going into the postseason. Luckily, it seemed like Penn State exited the game with no serious damage. Dakari Nelson went out of the game. I did not see him at the end of the game. That's something to monitor because he's a core part of the special teams, and obviously any more linebacker depth that they lose is going to be a problem. But Penn State started with a fumble and then a 25-yard touchdown to Caden Prather on the first play of the game. And it was two things that couldn't happen. The first, obviously, being giving a turnover and allowing Maryland life, especially early. That was a problem, especially because a lot of things that you were concerned about came true. The reason Nick Singleton was in that position is because the offensive line in the interior could not block. They were getting stoned at the point of attack. And then the question I had in the post in the tailgate show was, did teams find a potential weakness or a potential way to attack Penn State where the short stuff, sure, you can dink and dunk, but if you're aggressive, you might get a couple of plays on this team with some of those big shots. And Maryland took it early and got it. And then the Penn State defensive line showed up and it was all over. It was over. I had people texting me and telling me like, oh no, here we go. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. James Franklin, big game situation. And yes, on the surface, the start was terrible. But when you look at some of the things that were happening on the play-to-play perspective and how Abdul Carter was playing and how that defensive line was absolutely controlling everything, there was no way Maryland could score points if that continued. And it continued. And so their dink and dunk, they had to get to their game plan, which was screens. And it was a lot of short passes and deception and a lot of stuff that honestly didn't make sense to me. The play where Dennis Sutton got immediate pressure on the quarterback from the backside on a screen. The concept itself was convoluted. So you're pulling on a play action, and then you're turning that play action into a screen. So you're drawing the eyeballs to the point of attack and then waiting to attack it. But more than anything, you're asking the right tackle to block down because you've got a puller and then attack a super aggressive Penn State defensive end. There's one thing you need to know about the Penn State defense. Those D ends are angry and they get upfield immediately. They don't wait for anything. They don't, in those situations, they don't read. They go. And yet the offensive game plan put that tackle in a situation where he has to take a step away from his target. And of course, in those situations, if the scheme isn't helping you out and you're not talented enough to do the job itself, it's all over. Emirs is here. He says, give the video a like to help out T. Frank. I appreciate you. It has been a while since I've mentioned this, but I don't control
the almighty algorithm.
What I do understand about it is interaction. You need to interact with the video. The chat's the chat is hot. We have people here live. Tell your friends. Don't let them go anywhere. We're celebrating for you, Penn State's win over Maryland and the advancement to the Big Ten Championship. But the likes, interactions of the video always help. So thank you so much. That's why you've got all of those people in my seat saying, like the video, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. It's just so YouTube knows that this account is alive. Virginia Slim says, T. Frank, what did you think about Rucci? He looked better at tackle of the two out there today to me. I didn't notice too much of Drew Shelton. One play was really bad where Drew Aller had to avoid a guy at his feet and scramble almost for that first down. Rucci looked good. Of the offensive linemen out there, he was not the one that was the problem for most of the game. Now, going into the details, I plan as of right now on doing my regular deep dive on the Penn State Maryland game to learn what we can learn about this game. But there's a good chance that I'm going to have to just pivot pretty quickly and start into Oregon preview. And we're going to do that here in just a little bit as well. I want you to know we're going to talk about Oregon. Through scouting these other teams, I have watched enough Oregon to have a general opinion with a lot of holes in it. So just bear with me on that about Oregon and the matchup with Ohio, with Penn State coming up this weekend. Steven says, glad to see you thought out, T. Frank. What a splendid and improbable outcome to a well-played game. So I was not okay after that tailgate show. I appreciate you, Stephen Lane. I'm embarrassed by how cold I was. I consider myself a hard man, somebody who is tough and can handle adversity. And it got into my bones, and I did not handle it. I'm glad that everyone I talked to also who was there has the same thought of that was unbelievably cold. The wind up there was real today. So the Penn State players, the slow start, the sloppiness, because that's really what started this game out, was really a sloppy game. Off-target passes from Aller, drop snaps all over the place. Ball handling in general was bad today. The holding by Dawkins, Salim Wormley had some issues to start, and then they were able to get into stretching out that defense, making them run laterally, and then attacking the seams of Maryland, who they're big up front. I don't know that they're super athletic, and so that was the plan. You saw this was what Iowa did to them. I think it was the last game. A lot of zone, and normally a 3-down front has an advantage against outside zone or zones in general. But if you can get big guys moving and you're able to open up the seams if they're not athletic enough to run with you, that's what you saw from Nick Singleton in the second half. Nick Singleton looks like he's back. That's a big thing coming into this playoff push. That being said, I don't think there's that final gear. You know, when Nick Singleton hit that final gear and his feet looked mad at the ground, he looked like a boxer punching the ground with his feet. I still don't see that explosiveness from him at this moment, but he's like 98% or 95% or 90% of Nick Singleton, whatever he is right now, is enough for this offense. Is it enough to win a Big Ten championship game? We will find out together. I think that there are still some issues that Penn State's going to face this coming week with the run game. This week, I think, is a little bit of a positive, maybe a false positive step, because if you look at the way they were able to run the football, it was not between the tackles. And I know that it looks like that way with the outside zone, but that's more targeted. Outside zone is more targeted outside the tackle than it is where it naturally lands, which is in between the tackles. It's kind of a confusing thing. It's easier for me to draw it for you, which is what I do at bluewhiteillustrated.com on the film study. So Jake here says, just appreciate what you and the On3 team does. Thank you for the coverage all year. Jake, I appreciate you saying that. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy holidays. We're not done. And that's the exciting thing, is we get to keep doing this. We get to do this, not just for one more game, guaranteed at this point, 2 more games for Penn State football. And maybe they get a bye. And they're like, this stuff is going to matter. Everything that you've wanted from this Penn State football team is on the table right now in a real way. So if you want to be negative and say they have no chance of beating Oregon and they're going to bounce in the first round of the playoff, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't see those people in the chat right now. I know they exist, and that's okay. You want to see it before you give that little shred of hope that might have been buried down underneath the years of resentment, of losing and disillusionment. I totally get it. I'm not trying to make fun of you. What I am saying is this is real. The card, like, it's all on the table right now for Penn State. Bruno is back. He says, thanks for the great coverage. I'm getting old. We play for the Big Ten title. Stop talking about the playoff. We can win the Big Ten this year, and that's arguably the best conference. We are. I'm not sure what you mean about stop talking about the playoff, because it matters. Like, the title game doesn't matter. It matters for your seeding in the playoff. But the title game doesn't matter. Like, you know, your ultimate goal is the championship. Penn State wrestling, they don't wrestle to win the Big Ten title, the dual title at the end of the season. They wrestle to get ready for the national championship run. And if they're good enough to win the tournament, that's great. But they're not going to sacrifice what is right in front of them for the ultimate goal. So I appreciate what you're saying, Bruno. And I appreciate people who were telling me not to put up the video and the graphic and the thumbnail all before the show. But there are some realities here that kind of matter in the conversation. So one of the things about the Penn State offense, getting back into this quickly before we get into talking about the defense, is the game plan for the offense really, to me, was taking shots today. There were a lot of shot plays, and in ways that were obvious. Now, Allard didn't take them, and that's another thing I want to see, what was going on behind the scenes, off the coverage, off the camera angle, in the coverage. But there were a lot of shots today. So if the Penn State offense felt like it was, kind of stuttering at first, I think that was a big part of it, is they did not have Trey Wallace to balance out those coverages and provide maximum threats on both sides between Amari Evans, Tyler Warren, and Trey Wallace. So they were not able to operate a lot of the things I think that they wanted to do. They wanted to chuck it deep, and then finally Allard threw it up. That I don't want to call it a duck because I think it was strategic, but when you throw the ball almost vertical and then it comes down, and not like it was like a pop fly from Amari Evans, and so I think part of that was like, this is the game plan. You need to throw one of these at some point, and I'll get into a little bit of that here in just a second on the Labatt Postgame Show. But I do want to get to the star of the game and the player of the game, the defensive player of the game for Penn State football. The defensive player of the game is brought to you by State College criminal defense attorney Matt McClenahan of McClenahan Law Firm. Matt is a Penn State superfan. He's an alum, and he is zealously representing his clients for over 2 decades. Accessible at mattmlaw.com. He expected a win and a cover. He said 49-10, so he's pretty close with 44-7. He always texts me his predictions. We're having conversations about this because, again, like, part of this for him was he wanted to be a part of the show. Literally, as a fan, wanted to be a part of the show. And I deeply appreciate Matt and all of his support here. If you ever need his services, mattmlaw.com. Our defensive player of the game is Abdul Carter. This was the most complete game he's played. It's fitting because it always comes against Maryland. If you think about his games last year as a linebacker, dominant against Maryland, here as an edge rusher, 6 total tackles to lead the team, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for a loss, and a quarterback hit. Multiple pressures. This is going to be an elite game from him, breakout player of the game. And the second half of his season has been that turn, that star turn, where maybe he's faced some weaker opponents from Ohio State on. I put up, and you want to go onto my social media, to my Twitter account, his sack on that inside rush. Abdul Carter does not do that in September. He was a speed rush around the outside, ghost rush, wants to dip underneath and wants to get to the quarterback without being touched. The fact that he's 260 pounds, he has that length and the power through contact. I talk about making blocks irrelevant, where you're just so strong through contact that, yeah, he's blocking you, his hands are on you, but you have not changed the speed or the direction of your movement. The great ones, the Micah Parsons, the Aaron Donalds, they do that. Abdul Carter looks like that rushing on the inside. He's not even, I was having a conversation with some people during the game. He's not even fully developed yet. I think 262, 265 is his final size. This is his first season playing defensive end, and the way he's playing the position is incredibly mature. And it is starting to hit at the right time for Penn State, who's going to go up against an Oregon team that loves to throw the football. Lots of screens, but they love to throw the football. So he's going to have opportunities against a good offensive line. That's a prove-it. Obviously, it's a prove-it game. It's a championship game, but it's a prove-it game against a good offensive line and pretty good tackles. Of course, this is the Labatt Postgame Show. And if it's frigid outside and it's 29 degrees and the real feel is 17 and you're sitting down and you're at your tailgate and all you want to do is be warm, grab a Labatt or a Labatt Blue Light, like the On3 tailgate, the Blue White Illustrated tailgate. We love having Labatt and Kevin here as a sponsor. Labatt Blue Light delivers an unmatched taste that goes down smooth every time. It was built for these cold weather times coming out of Canada, right? Whether you're tailgating with 107,000 friends or 65,000 at the game or just watching on the couch, Labatt and Labatt Blue Light are your go-to for unbeatable drinkability. Bleed blue and white. Drink blue and white, blue and light. And you can find your Labatt products at W.R. Hickey in State College, 1321 East College Avenue. Please drink responsibly. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. You know, we've had that sponsor here for weeks now, most of the season. I don't think I've ever read it right once. I feel so bad about that. I read it and practiced it before coming on the show. It did not help. Something about Labatt just does not roll off my non-French tongue. And of course, our newest sponsor here on the BWI Live postgame show is Collegiate Athletic Travel. Penn State's going to the playoff, and they're going to be going to an amazing destination one way or another. So if you've never been on a trip to a bowl game, go with the people who know how to do this. One call or visit to athletictravel.com. You can get all the playoff action with the experts. All-inclusive bowl game travel brought to you by Collegiate Athletic Travel. Here's what they'll get you. Round-trip charter, transportation from select Pennsylvania cities, including State College, deluxe hotel accommodations, airport and game transfers, game ticket, and accompaniment of their expert on-site staff. What I'm telling you is they literally take care of everything. You buy in, and then you go be a fan. You don't have to be your own travel agent looking for budgets and, oh man, do we stay at this hotel? They'll get you to the team hotel. They'll get you to events. We've worked with Collegiate Athletic Travel before, and I can tell you that these guys know what they're doing. So check them out, athletictravel.com. When Penn State's bowl destination is announced, when we know where they're going and who they're going to be matched up against, you want to be the first person on the plane. You want to be the first person on the bus, and you want to be there with Collegiate Athletic Travel. And if the full budget is not in your hemisphere, they can also do land-only packages. You get yourself to the game, and then they give you the all-inclusive experience once you get there. To me, that's pay for an experience that's worth having. And if half of your runtime is not thinking about what coverage Penn State's going to have to beat, and you're thinking about how do I get to that place on time, and do I have my parking tickets, and how do I not get towed, forget that nonsense. That's the worst. Check out Collegiate Athletic Travel. They'll get you taken care of. Okay, so Penn State wanted to throw the ball in this game, and Maryland runs a lot of cover 3 and a lot of cover 4. Watching this game, it felt like, and watching practice this week, it felt like, yeah, Penn State's going to have their selection of targets wherever they want over the field. But there was one thing that Maryland did not give Penn State this year, and I'll give Mike Locksley credit, because they make the best same mistakes with they are the best at making the same mistake over and over again with any team in the country, where they'll do the same thing over and over again. Jahan Dotson playing cover 0 against Jahan Dotson, playing aggressive cover 1 or cover 0 or cover 4 quarters against Penn State last season, when this was a team that struggled to do a bunch of things through the air, and then they gave them a bunch of free access throws. There was one thing they did not allow Penn State to have this year, and that was the explosive play down the field. So they took that away, and it took Penn State a little bit of time to adjust. But once they got it rolling and they got the offensive line running laterally, it was game over. The short fields obviously were a big help. And that defensive line, which played feisty at times, I think you could see the issues they have with size and power overall on a 3-man defensive front on those 4th down plays, where Drew Aller is just leaning forward for 1.5 yards every single time. It was unstoppable. It wasn't even a question each of the times that they leaned forward for a first down. Michael McCollin asks, can we get a Tyler Warren blizzard already? Well, it depends. What signifies a Tyler Warren blizzard? So what is Tyler Warren, because I'm not putting gravel and grit in my and hair in my blizzard. So for some reason, the thing that's coming in my head is spaghetti, and that's disgusting, obviously. So comment in the chat what you think goes in a Tyler Warren blizzard, because I'm coming up blank just off the top of my head. But the things that make me think of Tyler Warren, tight end, so he's physical, so something rocky, like Rocky Road, moose tracks. Maybe that's it. It's just a moose tracks blizzard. And then obviously the hair. It's also got to be jumbo size. Like it's got to be the size of a small child to get your Tyler Warren blizzard. Ryan says, T. Frank, you're awesome and doing a great job this year. Playing in Oregon and their speed on turf worries me, but another worry for another day. Yeah, Oregon is very fast. If there's one thing that they are above all else, it's fast. So guys like A.J. Harris, we've seen him miss at the line of scrimmage and press, and we've seen what happens when he misses. They're a team that is going to spam you with the short play and then throw over top with the speed that they have. They have some electric speed players. So Penn State's going to be careful on defense, but I do think that they can play with that team. Tackle box speed is the part I'm interested in. Linebackers, Tony Rojas, Kobe King versus their running backs, who I know are very fast. The name of the running back is escaping me, but he is shifty as anything. Jordan James, I think, is who it is. He's really fast. So if you're overrunning something or you're out of position, the cutbacks will be something that they're attacking you with. So Penn State, again, they've got to be good next week. Another good team. Brett says, what a day. Oregon is not Ohio State. No James Franklin curse to stop us from winning. Even if it's inferior opponents, this offense is finding a real identity, consistently move the football. I am concerned about the offense. So we'll spin ahead, and I'm just bouncing between these things again as you ask the questions and put things into the chat, which then goes directly into my brain. I think Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle, is going to be the biggest challenge for Penn State on that interior. When they've struggled against interiors that are either bigger and stronger or athletic enough to move with Penn State, and Harmon is big and he's very strong. I think Jordan Birch is who I'm thinking of. He's kind of a 280-pound hybrid edge defender. Yeah, Jordan Birch, he plays a little bit on the edge for them, and he is 295 pounds. So they've got a lot of pretty good interior defensive linemen and a lot of guys that have that hybrid size. So if Penn State wants to play in that game, they're going to have to find a way to manufacture running the football. Right off the top of my head, a lot of speed options to the outside, Tyler Warren running the football. The downhill stuff, I have a hard time seeing that be a part of this conversation. And then, of course, you add in, it might be a big Bo Perbula game or a big option Derek Harmon in the middle of the A-gap sort of situation. So all the toys, all the tricks on the field for Penn State and that defense and the offense to try and get some points on that defense. The secondary is the part that I don't know as much about, to be truthful. I've seen enough of watching other teams to gauge the level of talent to know that D-line is going to be hard to run on, and they might be physical enough to power through and get pressure on Penn State and on Drew Aller. But the secondary, can Penn State generate any sort of openings at the second level for Penn State, for the receivers and for Tyler Warren and for the running backs? Chuck brings up something else that I think is really important. Dylan Gabriel has not looked good at times. He will throw stupid interceptions. Dylan Gabriel has been this guy since UCF who is, I don't want to say he's Patrick Mahomes because that gives him the credit of the dynamic plays, but that's his style of play. It is confident. It is throw it up. He is the hashtag chuck it deep quarterback. Now he's rewarded for that, and he makes some spectacular plays. He extends plays incredibly well. I think he throws off platform really well, but those also turn into interceptions at the goal line. Those also turn into interceptions and fumbles and situations like that. So forcing a bad Dylan Gabriel game is absolutely part of the game plan for Penn State. That starts with pressure from Abdul Carter and Zane Durant, and then it turns into playing not as a much aggressive man coverage this game from the defense, which transitions into talking about the defensive game plan, which I thought was kind of hilarious. During this particular game and going forward against Oregon, zone might be really important, especially if you get those zone pressures, because what they did today, I'm fairly certain was mostly a reheated game plan from last year. So last year, Manny Diaz gave 1,000 different looks of the exact same coverage. It was just cover 2. Blitz 2 corners off the edge, rotate the secondary over, get a KJ Winston interception. That's something that happened last year. Blitz 2 corners, and this time you've got a cover 2 corner to the field, and the quarterback just throws it over there because, he's not the starter, and suddenly Davian Collins gets an interception in underneath coverage. I saw a lot of 4-man rushes, play cover 2, profit. So Penn State didn't even have to come up with a new game plan for this game on defense. They just rolled out what they did last year, and it worked really well. In fact, the one play, the man coverage play on the first play of the game, that was the one where they gave up a touchdown. So really interesting. That's something else I really want to see on film tomorrow is that what I saw? Because, you need to see the safeties, you need to see the secondary to get the full picture, because you could see the underneath coverage, and that was pretty much what we got to see today. So defensively, I want to know about the rotation going forward, because we saw a lot of Tyrese Mills recently. Minnesota, a game they had to win, a game they needed to secure, and in the first half, Tyrese Mills is getting playing time. He's a veteran. He's in that boundary safety because he's physical, and I think he hates deep in his heart because the way he hits, he's angry at somebody. He's playing that boundary safety and taking some of those physical snaps off Jalen Reed. What happens in these big games? It's the same question I had today. Ty Blanding got in the first half to get some of those reps at the fourth defensive tackle, which is kind of my expectation. When in doubt, go to the older player between him and Xavier Gilliam. But then the question becomes, in a big game, how short is the bench? Because you saw the receivers today. Penn State had 3 receivers that they played. Amari Evans, Julian Fleming, and Liam Clifford, and that was basically it. I don't think they played anybody else until the second half. And then you saw the freshmen come on the field, and you saw that final play of the game to Tysier Denmark, who, by the way, really nice catch, a contested catch there from Bo Pribula to throw that, to his player for that bang play, and then Denmark to come through contact and catch the football. He's more physical than I expected. The way he was used in high school, he was very much a space player. Slot, jet sweeps, end arounds, get him running. Not necessarily a guy you lined up at X and said, okay, go beat a corner. And he's doing so much more of, the physical stuff in the game that we've seen so far. A couple of really nice catches. Always knew the hands were there and the elusiveness. His burst has gotten better. I think he's gotten a little bit faster since he's got on campus, but all those things are still being, work in progress. And we have not seen them use him in any situation that is meaningful. And I guess that's the conversation that I've been having in my head is there room in the rotation? Trey Wallace gets healthy. You got 4 receivers. Do they trust that he can go out there with Aller and make those plays? We haven't seen it yet, and it would be a shock if they did that in the biggest game of the year, in the championship game. Jim Himes asks, where was Trey Wallace hurt? He was at practice on Wednesday. He was questionable coming to the game, and I think our guys at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com said that he did not warm up with the team during the pregame warmups and was not active today. So there's no status update necessarily. There was some stuff that I can't confirm or deny. Literally, I don't know. Just some other things that people were talking about at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So you can go, another great reason to subscribe to get some of those insider information stuff. You got a question in the chat? Please throw it in there, and we'll be talking about what you want to know going forward in this game. But Penn State is playing in the Big Ten championship game. And I've got to do something here. And I'm doing this for both me and Greg Pickle. Because 3 weeks ago, when we were sitting here before Ohio State played Indiana and everything was still up in the air, the odds of Penn State making the championship game were unbelievably low. The scenarios were not far-fetched from a perspective of 2 teams had to lose and there had to be a tiebreaker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just was these teams that you don't expect to lose need to lose. And here we are. They did. And I know that this graph is going to say one thing, but me and Greg were wrong. You notice that's the Nate was wrong, but I've never had an opportunity to use the Nate was wrong graphic, so I figured now is the opportunity for me to use the Nate was wrong graphic, even though it was T. Frank was wrong and Greg was wrong in that situation. Let's talk about something else from this game. Corey Smith was awesome on his birthday. Another great run. Another couple great runs from Corey Smith in this game. He's gonna be good. Like that. We've seen enough now. We've seen enough of the late game stuff. He's playing way above his head in those situations. As soon as he gets in the weight room, like he has one objective this offseason, and it is to get jacked. As much muscle as he can put on in as short a period of time as possible to make him as dynamic as possible. His short area quickness, his vision, his instincts as a runner. That's very exciting for the future. That's an exciting thing for Penn State and the running game. But again, I think it is a two-man backfield for going forward. And truthfully, I know Kaytron Allen is better than he's playing right now. But the evidence is pretty clear. Singleton has averaged over 6 yards carry the last 2 games. Kaytron Allen averaged 2.6 yards per carry this game. Opportunity, the way the running game works, is fickle. But Singleton's speed and his burst open up these zone running lanes. Kaytron Allen is more of the patient, pick your spot, and that requires the offensive line to keep working, right? To work those blocks and work those blocks and work those blocks. And in college, more than in the NFL, when you're doing that and you don't have a great offensive line, they just lose the block. So there's a little bit of a disadvantage for Kaytron Allen, where I think even last year, his success was he ran into a lot of muddy looks and he just ad-libbed. Not in a sense of he was, breaking any rules, going against the system, but he was better in the chaos. And now that things are a little more straightforward, sometimes I feel like he gets in trouble for cutting back when he doesn't need to. And sometimes he's running into looks where both the offensive line is not fast enough to get out in front of the players, and he's not fast enough to outrun the whole thing. So Singleton, his slashing ability, I think he needs to, again, we're being picky here. He did a great job today. There are still times where I'd love to see him just take a second. Just don't turn into the Hulk and run straight into the offensive line. Take a beat, see if there is that cutback lane. A little more Kaytron Allen in the sauce there for Nick Singleton, and I think that there's a little bit more meat on the bone for him as a runner, but at the same time, he's providing them that balance in the game, and I think that's really important. His hands and getting him in space is going to be absolutely essential in this next game because, again, I think the running between the tackles is going to be a struggle. So they're going to need to find a way to get him the ball in his hands where it's not -2 yards before he's having to make that decision. Now, it could be wrong. They could be athletic enough to run around the defensive line for Oregon. But just from what I've seen on film, that feels like that's going to be a tough task. Drew Aller in this game, again, there's been a couple of weird games. Short fields and a pass to Tyler Warren that wasn't a pass. It was a backwards lateral. So he's 17 for 26, 171 yards and a touchdown. And yet the team scored more points in this game than they have in many of their previous games. So in a game where it felt like they couldn't run very well early and they had to rely on Aller, and then suddenly the script flipped. It's just a weird game from a game flow perspective. There's not a narrative here that I can tell you from here's what happened. Eventually, they remembered they were better than Maryland, and they rolled up 412 yards, and they held Maryland to less than 200 yards in the game. Any other questions about Oregon? Any other questions about what's coming up with the Big Ten championship game, maybe this game? Michael McCullen asks a question. He says, what's the deal with Drew and Fleming? This is something I've talked about at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Michael's a member over at the site. It's just something I've observed, that some guys have good chemistry, natural chemistry, and other guys fit together like Lego blocks that don't have the pluggy in pieces. And for some reason, these two have not been able to consistently connect. It's ironic that the game-saving plays at the end of the USC game, the season-defining plays, were to Julian Fleming, because even in practice, when we're there and we're watching and we're giving our observations, you can see them, in our highlights on the Tailgate Show. There are more miscommunications between Drew Aller and Julian Fleming than any of the other receivers. And Michael, I don't know. I honestly don't know. It just feels like every time they are a step off in terms of today. Perfect example. Let's talk about this play. Drew Aller throws hot to Tyler Warren on a screen pass out in front of him. That's a miss. He missed on that play, early in the game. Then it's 3rd and 10, I want to say 3rd and 12, something like that. And there's a deep comeback that Fleming is running along the sideline. To my understanding of how this works, the quarterback is throwing to a spot. He's throwing to the receiver who's supposed to be at the sticks. So he's basically throwing at the yard marker, at the actual pylon out of bounds as a general landing spot, so that the receiver runs upfield, creates separation, comes back downfield, catches the ball at the sticks, first down, new set of downs. From where I was sitting in my office, from the angle we saw, Aller put the ball on the imaginary yellow line on TV. Fleming was a step behind. And I don't know what happened. Maybe he was held in his route transition. Maybe he ran a step too deep. Maybe Allard threw too wide. And, it's just an angle thing. But no matter what it is, we've seen Allard miss those. I want to be fair here. We've seen Allard miss those deep comebacks before to Trey Wallace and guys that he has a good connection with. So I'm not trying to put it all on one play. It's just a perfect description of when they're off, that's what it looks like, where he's throwing into a zone and trying to get him to sit down a little bit. And then Fleming is running into like upfield. But, it's something that at this point, I just don't know how you fix that or what the cause of it is, or if I'm just making that up in my head. Usually I'm pretty good at picking out trends and seeing patterns. And it is a clear pattern that those two don't connect on the unspoken level, right? The body language, understanding. I don't feel like Aller can read Fleming, and he doesn't know where he's going to be when he releases the football. And I just find that interesting, odd and interesting, because those are two unbelievably hard workers. Those are two guys that, from Fleming's perspective, we see him working on the jugs machines all the time. You see him working on the one that he talked about this summer where, the one that can dial in exactly the route you want to run. See him working super hard on all that stuff. He's a good route runner. He does the drills in practice the way he's supposed to do them. It's just the application of those. Sometimes you just don't fit, like sometimes it's like a relationship. You can like each other and you just, it's not a fit. I don't know how to describe it. Ryan is back. He says, feels like Dawkins is a leader verbally, but he's not as good as the last few years at center. Doesn't have it from a center standpoint. Here's the thing. He's what they have. So they've got to make it work. And he is a guy that has played, when he plays well, they are able to run the football. But there are times where he's got athleticism at that position is really important. So in a zone system, you have what are called reach blocks, where you are trying to steal a gap from the defense. You're trying to run around the defensive tackle and take that gap away from them so the running back has a running lane. And then wherever the gap forms, based on the wins and losses and where the defensive linemen and the linebackers land, is where the running back runs. And he's got to be athletic enough to get over top of those plays. So lost weight this offseason, right? Went down to 295, so he can do that. He can run. He can get his hips on the other side of the defensive tackle. The problem is, once he gets over there, he can't sustain the block. And he doesn't create that distortion, that spatial distortion to get around and then force the issue and win. So I think Nick Dawkins can be athletic. I think Nick Dawkins could be powerful. But of course, like as an offensive lineman, you want to be athletic and powerful. So if they're going to go into these situations, and I think it is helpful that they got 350-pound Venga Ioane on one side and 330-pound Sal Wormley on the other, but when they're in these running situations, you create those one-on-ones, that's where some of the struggles are. And it's not just on him. I think Venga didn't have a great game today, but that's just first blush sort of read. I have to go back and look at all those things. There were just a couple of plays where I saw he's fallen off a block when he shouldn't be, or maybe he was late to diagnose something. And then Sal Wormley, when he is not dominating from a physical standpoint, from a strength standpoint, they do have some issues with combinations of cascading things on the inside. And that's where, if they have enough power and they're able to get the right combinations up front, they can spring guys into the second level. So Nathan is here. Nathan, you seem new. I have not seen you before here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel on the Postgame Show. This is the Labatt Postgame Show, by the way. Thank you for being here. We did talk about this earlier. I don't know. It does not knock them out of the playoff. They are in the playoff no matter what happens next week. I would be wildly shocked if something were to happen where they went from the third-ranked team to the 13th ranked team. That seems crazy. So no. They said they wouldn't punish the losers, but if SMU loses to a 4-loss Clemson, can't you put them both in? That affects all the teams below the conference championship. Penn State has played everyone on their schedule, and clearly the committee has valued their schedule and their one loss higher than other teams and their victories elsewhere. So, no, there's no chance that the runner-up in the Big Ten, the second best or best conference in college football, gets knocked completely out of the playoff. That is just, they have been clear that they value the brand and they value the conference too much. They're trying to get 4 Big Ten teams in. They're trying to get 5 Big Ten teams or 8 of the 12 from the Big Ten and the SEC. That's where this is going. So if they were to do something different, would be incredibly counter to what they've been doing and counter to the idea that this is going towards a 2-team conference no matter what anyway. So yeah, I think from a political standpoint, from a rationale standpoint, there's just absolutely no way that they would do that because it doesn't benefit them and it doesn't benefit anybody else, because the Big 12, nobody, how do I say this nicely? The Big 12 is I'm not going to say it nicely. The Big 12 is the leftover teams from the mergers of the Power 5. You look at the Pac-12. Where did they go? If you weren't in the Big 10, the bulk of the good teams went to the Big 12. After Texas, Oklahoma, and the rest of the quality teams defected to the SEC. So that's not a part of the conversation where they're going to put 2 no matter what. That would be the worst if you put in 2 Big 12 teams. Michael is back. He says, how far does Ohio State fall? I don't know. 2-loss team, lost to a bad loss, good loss to the number 1 team, a bad loss to a 6-5 Michigan team. Or I guess a 7-5 Michigan team. Again, they want these teams in the playoff. So 8? I don't know. This is the problem is I really wish Greg were here. I really wish somebody who pays attention to this stuff. I'm the football nerd who's being like, listen, the matchups of the next game, here you go. When it comes to the matchups of what does the political room say? I don't know. No idea. But I do know people who have those conversations and who know those things are going to be talking to you here in just a few minutes. We're getting down into the final couple minutes here at the BWI Live Postgame Show. Hopefully, this has been entertaining. It has been illuminating. We care less about what's going on in the game today as we do about what happens next, and I understand that, so I'm trying to do both of those for you today. But if you want to get the recap of the game from the people who were there, our instant analysis video with Greg and Fitz and Nate is coming up in just a few minutes. James Franklin's press conference as well to hear from the Nittany Lions head coach of what the meaning of this game, the opportunity to play in the Big Ten championship game, all the impact and significance, All of that is coming up in just a few minutes. So stick with me here. Tell your friends about the postgame show because we're going to be doing this now until Christmas at this point, maybe even beyond, maybe into January. Maybe football season is going to go all the way into the NFL playoffs. We'll be doing this until it's warm outside again. But that's coming up in just a little bit. So some final thoughts here about Maryland and Penn State. I don't know if I like that last touchdown from a bunch of different perspectives, but I also don't care enough to be upset about it. Is that a fair position to have? Like, you feel like the sportsmanship, did that touchdown and the margin 44-7, will that influence anything in the final tally of what happens after the Big Ten championship game? Do those 7 points matter? But also, do those 7 points matter the other way? Does it matter that they did or didn't happen? I think we get wrapped up in that a little bit too much. It didn't feel good. It just didn't make you feel good. I do like seeing Tyser Denmark get some work, but those two plays at the end of the game, were those reps valuable enough to have a slightly less than stellar sportsmanship look? And again, does that matter at all? Or am I just bringing it doesn't matter. And Lee, here's the thing is, Lee Felix says, of course it matters. Can't let Notre Dame jump over Penn State. But they're going to the Big Ten championship game. We have to, this is the part I tried to start with, Lee, and the part I'm trying to wrap my head around too, of like, this changed a whole lot in the last 24 hours, really in the last 5 hours, 6 hours. The conversation with Notre Dame does not matter anymore. It straight up doesn't matter. They're in the Big Ten championship game. They have another quality opportunity to beat another quality team. And if they win or lose that is going to be more important than whether Notre Dame beat USC by 30 points or not. Because next week's seedings don't matter for Penn State now. The final ones are the ones that matter now. They have opted into another opportunity. And it's just, after this whole time of since that Ohio State game, this has been the thing. This has been the thing that James Franklin has been talking about since the loss to Ohio State. Even in the moment of that loss, of his post-game press conference, he said everything they want is still in front of them. And no one heard him. And no one listened. Because losing to Ohio State has been the end of the season for 8 years. 9 years now. No, 8 years. Since the last time they beat Ohio State 8 years ago and went to the Big Ten championship game. And he said, everything is still in front of them if they take care of the business they need to take care of. They did that, and Ohio State did not. And now Penn State's in the Big Ten championship game. So for the people who are thinking that the season was over at the beginning of the month, and you're trying to rewire your brain to be like, well, Notre Dame, whether it is likely or not likely, they can be the number 1 seed in the playoff. That fact is still on the desk in front of me. That is still a reality for this team. It was not a reality until Ohio State lost to Michigan, but it was still technically a reality even then. So that's the point of this 12-team playoff, is that there are more opportunities. And in the first year of it, Penn State is 11-1. And we can talk until the sun rises again tomorrow morning about whether or not they have a quality schedule and whether you think this team is good or not. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. It will matter when it matters on the field. But when it comes to the politicking and the college football playoff and the committee, they have liked Penn State more than you the whole time. Most likely. Even the people who love Penn State, the fans who have been here, the overwhelming conversation has been pointing at the things that we talked about, right? Yeah, like I agree with you. X's and O's, there are some things that are going to be a problem. But Penn State has found a way to be competitive with every single team that they have faced this year, including Ohio State. Now, Ohio State has some major flaws. Despite their talent, they have some major flaws. And the injuries along the offensive line tanked that offense in certain ways that made it impossible for them to win a game where they were trying to be the physical, like their identity. And I don't want to make this final 5 minutes about Ohio State, but it is. Today is about that because they lost. And the reasons that they lost put Penn State in a position where, yes, Penn State also has flaws, but theirs didn't cost them because the universe flipped a coin and Michigan wasn't as good this year and wasn't on Penn State's schedule, but they still beat Ohio State. And Washington lost everything to the NFL, and USC imploded because, again, kind of like California, it was built on a fault line, is going to fall into the ocean at some point. So Penn State survived and advanced to the point that they are now on the verge of being a team that has a bye. Did we ever get a Tyler Warren blizzard confirmation? I did not see it in the chat. And I really want to know what's in a Tyler Warren blizzard. So I'm going to do this thing where I read live on air, and that was like 15 minutes ago, so I might not even be able to find it. But I'm going to go, okay, final decision on what a Tyler Warren blizzard is. And if you're joining the show late, it's because somebody asked, what is in a Tyler Warren blizzard? Michael asks, what's in a Tyler Warren blizzard? So I'm going to shoot from the hip and say, number one thing is it's going to have graham cracker crumble, because it's got to be gritty and it's got to be tough, but it's also got to be sweet, because it's sweet to watch Tyler Warren play football. It's really fun. I'm going to say it's got fudge in it because he is a deceptively smooth runner. Fudge, when you get it the right texture, is deceptively smooth. So we got graham cracker, fudge. Let's make it a s'more and get some toasted marshmallow in there for the obvious reasons. I feel like that's a great place to end this. Worms in the dirt. No, I like mine. M&Ms for the crunch. Okay, but only certain M&Ms. We're not going to have this thing bleeding into like the yellow bleed super easy in a blizzard, and you've got the red. Like I don't want, because Tyler Warren isn't messy. The way he plays, Tyler Warren is not messy. So I'm going to go with mine. That's just going to be what we're going to do. So graham cracker, fudge, or some sort of chocolate that isn't chunk, and then we're going to end with some toasted s'more. All right, here's what's coming up from Penn State football, just so you know. We're all recapping this together. I'm assuming James Franklin is going to have a press conference on Monday to recap this and preview the Big Ten championship game. So we're going to have that live for you here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. If that's at Monday at noon, which is still my plan, I still expect those things, we'll have that for you. Now we're going to have probably a Wednesday practice. That's back on the table. We'll have our James Franklin Wednesday practice updates, and of course, our practice updates from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, what we see, health, etc., what they're working on, how they want to play for Oregon. That's coming up this week as well. And of course, we'll have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, the BWI Live Show, recapping Maryland, talking about more Oregon. You'll hear from Fitz. You'll hear from Nate. You'll hear from Greg. And you'll hear from Ryan. Oh, yeah, National Signing Day is on Wednesday. We're going to have National Signing Day coverage as well. And then we're going to recap that on Thursday on the recruiting show. So tons of stuff coming up this week. We're going to know where the Nittany Lions stand with some elite prospects, how this could influence the decisions for those players going to the Big Ten championship game. Penn State's in a competition for some of these guys with Oregon. It's going to be fun. So join us this week. Subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'll talk to you then.